That's exactly where we're at now.
Give me número 8.
Ocho.
Thank you.
Okay, 2 weeks ago in Parashah Zav, God spoke to Moses to command Aaron and his sons in how to prepare for their duties as priests for God and for the people. For 7 days, Aaron and his sons stayed at the tent of meeting. They, when you're learning something, you're constantly just doing it and doing it. Not only were they constantly doing it, but they didn't even move from the tent of meeting. They stayed there for 7 days, It's kind of like when we go to Sukkot and we all gather together and we all camp out together and we're all within a certain distance from each other, but we do everything together and we just constantly, and it's a rehearsal, okay? It took 7 full days of repeated practice to make sure Aaron and his sons got everything down right. I don't know how many of you, most of you have been in the workplace. And when you're in the manufacturing or business or some, in that kind of line of work, they train you how to do a job. I know that the first time I ever got on a forklift, I had somebody right there with me every single time because they're training you. And the best way to learn something is to do it. You can watch many videos. It's kind of like driving a car. You can watch as many videos as you like, but you're not going to learn how to drive that car until you get in it and start doing it. So Aaron and his sons, this process, it took for 7 consecutive days. They were there to get the job done, to get it down right. And what was the reward for all this rehearsal? We find this out in verse 6. It says, and Moses said, this is the thing which the Lord has commanded you to do, so that the glory of the Lord may appear to you. And imagine at this time, then they knew they already witnessed Mount Sinai, and then here we are again, a year later, or about a year later, the Lord is going to appear to them again. Okay. Aaron and his sons would offer up offerings to the Lord and God would appear to them. We have reached now the 8th day. So now Moses calls for Aaron and his sons to begin the sacrifices. Now they're going to, everything they learned, all this repetition of getting everything down right. Now here it is. It's your chance to shine. So Moses calls for Aaron and his sons to begin. And chapter 9 is all about the offerings given on the 8th day. The 8th day is none other than we are at Nisan 1. Okay, so now we're exactly 1 year later, 1 year after the departure from Egypt. So I'm giving you a little time frame there. So we're 1 year later. Like I said, 7 days of rehearsing, and the big day has come. No more practicing. It's time for Aaron the high priest and his sons to minister to God and offer sacrifices to him and from the people.
So they're still in the wilderness?
They are in the wilderness. Frank asked, are they still in the wilderness? Yes, they are. They are in the wilderness. This is the Mishkan. This is the tabernacle. This is where Moses, the word tells us that he tore it down himself and set it back up. How he can do the whole thing. I think, was it last week or the week before, we were saying that it was something like the whole thing was like about 60,000 pounds or something like that. So, but that is what the word says. Okay, what a celebration it must have been. Every Israelite was present. Okay, the Lord called for everybody to be present and, front and center, and they were all there. Everything in the preceding chapters has now come together. I mean, how many chapters did we spend on building the Mishkan, building the tabernacle, the fence? People brought in all their jewelry, everything that people brought as gifts to Moses to build the tabernacle. And all of this, it's done now, and all eyes now are on Moses and Aaron. Okay, God is now going to come down to be with his people. And what an amazing thing. There are many religions out there where their gods are afar, and never right there with the people, but that isn't the way the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I mean, he's always wanted to dwell with his people, just like at the garden, asking for Adam, where are you? Adam walking in the cool of the evening with the Lord. I mean, hallelujah, and that is what the Lord has always desired to be, right there with his people. Okay. And, Moses tells Aaron to take for himself certain animals for a sacrifice to God. Then Aaron would speak, after that, after his sacrifices, he would speak to the Israelites and tell them what they needed to bring. And he would officiate over it, all these offerings. The Midrash says that the first offering would be Aaron's offering for himself. It even says that in the Torah. He could not make any other offering until he became right with God. So it's not like Aaron isn't special where he does not have to bring an offering. He's going to be just like everyone else. In fact, he had to be first. Before he could minister to others, he would have to get right with the Lord, and then he can do that. Doesn't it remind you when we have our Kiddush and in the word where it says, before you bring your offering, if you've offended somebody, go make it right with them, and with Aaron here, he's bringing his offering and he is making it right before God. Every Tuesday. Oh, go ahead, Maria. Get the microphone.
If you see, it says the first offering that Aaron had to do for God was a calf, and that was for the sin of the golden calf that he did.
Yep, and that's what the commentaries will tell you that. Others will say no, because they would bring the calf, but then how many times would a priest bring a calf? Now, would every time they brought the calf, would that be because of the incident? No, but they're telling, but what the rabbis say is for this particular one, you're absolutely right. This was because of the incident of the golden calf.
They rarely brought calves at all.
Right.
I mean, they would bring a bull
Mhm.
that was 1 year old.
Oh, Paul, use the microphone.
Bill has the mic.
Bill, can Paul use your microphone, Bill?
I believe you started without me.
We thought we were gonna be able to finish on time.
I asked Frank to lock the door.
All right. In regards to the calf, they rarely brought calves because they were required to bring a bull, a 1-year-old bull, or if it was a high priest issue, it was a 3-year-old mature bull. And a calf is a whole different deal. I mean, when you start talking about calves, you start thinking of a young,
Yes.
immature, but we're talking about a 1-year-old. And then if you're talking about a heifer, that's the red heifer, and that's a
Right.
completely different thing too.
Right. So go ahead, Tila.
I think what's important with this for us today is that even with the Amidah, how we come before the Lord, prayer time, you come before the Lord. Anytime you come before the Lord, you should be coming with clean hands and a pure heart.
Amen.
And I think that's a
Amen.
lot in
Amen.
receiving from this, with the sacrifices and so forth, because he's holy gods.
Amen. Well, Tila, what it reminded me of when I was doing this was every Tuesday night prayer.
Exactly.
Both you and Tina have us go before the Lord and ask the Father for forgiveness as we go through cleansing prayer before we even take Kiddush, before we even get into the prayer. And what this says is before we can pray for others, we need to pray for ourselves and get it right. And then after we do that, now we can get in. So Aaron, it was Aaron first, then his sons, and then the people. In letter A, God calls Aaron and his sons to minister. So calls and minister are the fill-ins. And then in letter B, God will appear to the people. And we might as well do letter C right now. All the rehearsing is over. I know when I was in school, I used to be in a drama club, and you rehearse, and you rehearse. And then the big day comes and you get out there and you do it. There were many who did that. There were many, and I'll tell you one thing, I know for me, Bruce and Pastor Paul are more polished, but I know a lot of times when I get up there and, I'm perspiring and
That's illegal.
I know. So it's, but that's what you do. You just keep doing it. This one here is the Torah study is my favorite study. If I'm teaching or if I'm out sitting down and somebody else is teaching, I love this study. I love being at the Torah study because I get to hear all the comments from Maria and from Bill and no, but I do love this study. Okay, so let's go. In chapter 9, it says that Moses called Aaron, his sons, and the elders. It was important that everyone in authority was front and center. So everyone in ancient times, the elders were the older men, and they're heads of clans and tribes. Who do you think picked out? Later on, we're going to get into the 12 spies or that went in to spy out the land. Who do you think picked them out? It would have been the elders. They were the head of the clans, and they were the ones that knew. In fact, they were wise. In fact, they were the ones that were making the decisions for their communities. In Hebrew, the term elder actually means the beards or the bearded ones. I don't know if you notice your pastors and elders in this congregation all have a little facial hair, and not all of them? Who does it? Well, I know not all of them.
Susan.
Kathleen doesn't. Susan, Peggy does. Oh,
I suppose
so-
it would be arranged.
No, but that's what in Hebrew, this term, they're calling them, the bearded ones or because these were the ones that, with the wisdom. And so they were the ones that were selected. And, we've already covered in Exodus where Jethro told Moses, why are you taking all this on? so get some people, some wise people that can make decisions, and then the hard ones they can bring to you, and then he would take them before the Lord. So it was, we see an example of elders as community leaders in Genesis chapter 50. In Genesis chapter 50, right at the end of Genesis, Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went all the servants. With him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. So when they went to bury Joseph's father, the elders, they were right there front and center. So it's very important. Elders are very important in the communities, So in Exodus 3:16, Moses was told to first tell the elders of Israel about God, how God wants to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. He said, "Go assemble elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me." Moses calls the elders together, and again in Exodus 20 and 12:21, he communicates to the elders the Passover commands. So all this, to tell you how important the elders were. A team of 70 elders in Exodus 24 have been selected as the governing body of Israel under the leadership of Moses, the Sanhedrin. This is the Sanhedrin. In Numbers 11, we read of God's specific call for his body of leaders to serve with Moses in the wilderness. He says, "Bring me 70 of Israel's elders who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting that they may stand there with you." So elders are very important. And, instead of we just reading over this, it's very important to know their role. They had a very important role in ministering to the people of Israel. Go ahead, Bill, you have the mic.
Which one's closer?
I'm not taking hers.
Go ahead, try.
In Revelation chapter 4, it says, "At once I saw that I was in spirit, and behold, a throne stood in heaven with one seated on the throne. And he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian, and around the throne was a rainbow, had the appearance of an emerald. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders, clothed in white garments."
Amen.
Predominant place.
Yeah, they have a predominant, yeah.
I thought Julie asked a question.
No, you said 4. Revelation 4.
Yeah.
It's
4.
24. Why 24? It was 70.
Not up in the,
Couldn't cut it.
Some didn't make it.
no, not up in around the throne.
12 apostles.
And that's what it most likely represents,
Yeah, that's what most
Yeah.
people think.
is the 12 tribes and the 12 apostles. Now, who are the 24 elders? We could, speculate or guess.
They all
But-
have new names anyway.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, that's so true. So, it is clear from these and other biblical passages that elders held a place of leadership from early period. It's not something that was a new term that they brought in, at the Second Temple. Over time, the position of elder progressed from an informal position of leadership to a specific calling of God. Elders continue to serve as local leaders throughout the Old Testament, throughout Torah. including during the return of the Jews to Jerusalem under Ezra and Nehemiah. Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say, even in Acts, these elders are full of wisdom, as you call them, the bearded ones.
Yeah.
But, even in Acts 6, when they chose the 7 men to serve, they had to be full of the Spirit. And I
Amen.
think too many churches, Christian churches, don't choose. They normally select people who are of great wealth to be on the boards and to be serving, instead of choosing who God has chosen full of the Spirit.
Amen. We you could tell, Peggy says, yeah, right, telling you right, because we've had this discussion before. So, and you're right, there's many times that we rush in and you don't want to raise a person up into a position that is not ready. Doesn't matter how much wealth he has. It doesn't matter if they're in they have a Jewish blood or whatever. You don't raise them up before their time, because if you do, you're going to have some problems or some issues there. Now go through your congregation, and if you have men and women that everything about them, like you said, with these spiritual gifts and understanding and full of wisdom, well, now you can raise them up. A lot of times in our congregation, we'll ask somebody and they'll turn us down. But you know what? I think that's just a humbling experience, because a lot of times, how many, I don't know if we've ever had anybody that we said, we'd like you to raise you up to this position. And, oh yeah, I've been ready for 25 years, No, majority, most of the time it's like, why me? It's a humbling experience to be selected, because, what is it? Where much more is required, so remember.
The problem was getting them set down after you find out they're not qualified.
Yeah.
Is that scripture, to whom much is given, much more is required, apply across the board? Not just the elders and leaders?
Mhm. Yes, I would say yes, because, there's some people, I think, that they're not ready to get up in front and give a word. Some people get some, that's why I think a lot of times with wisdom, Bruce and Kathleen will say, if you have a word, take it to, Pastor Paul or Pastor Vince and and share it, or the elders, and then, we'll bring it forward, because, there are sometimes, the word just isn't for the congregation, it's for that person. I believe the Lord is saying that, whatever, and, it's for that person.
I don't think it just applies to elders though, and leadership. When you're called, I don't know. Never.
Bill, give Peggy the microphone.
We're hogging the mic.
Peggy has a comment.
Well, because I don't think it just applies to people who are in leadership, because when you were called out, you had certain obligations you had to meet. You were either going to follow or you weren't. You had a certain standard and criteria you had to meet. You couldn't be in the practice of sinning after you got saved.
Right.
So I don't think it's a much is required of
Right.
someone who follows.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but I also think that there are certain callings like that of a pastor where there is much more required, So, okay, let's move on. In letter D, the elders also come forward. The elders represent wisdom. So the fill-ins are forward and wisdom.
Say it again.
The elders also come forward. The elders represent wisdom. Remember, Aaron and his son lived for an entire week at the tabernacle of meeting. And they still had to bring his sin offering. You know, that this is one thing you look at. They lived there for the entire week. Imagine living right there in the presence, you know, getting everything ready for the entire week. Now we're at the 8th day, we're getting started, and they still have to bring an offering. And the 7 days, you would have thought that, you know, they're doing it. Boy, you know, these men must really be spiritually filled, holy men, you know. But everything the priest did in the previous week prepared them for this moment. Okay, in verses 8 through 14, Aaron is identifying himself with everyone else. Just as the people are required to bring an offering, you know, so are the priests. They are also required. In fact, it begins with the priests. And it's as though Aaron is saying, I'm a sinner too. You know, Aaron needed to atone for himself before he can accept offerings to atone for the people. So in letter E, Aaron brings a sacrifice for himself and then the people. Then in verses 15 through 21, it is now it's now the offerings for the people. Sacrifices are brought on behalf of the people. Everything was done just as Moses trained them to do. You know, I can't emphasize this more than enough. How many chapters, like I said before, did we spend on everything getting right? You know, everything has to be right. So Moses is training Aaron and the sons. And then, like I told you earlier, you know, the best way to learn something is to do it. When you start doing it, then it's really, the repetitions are going to be natural. You just start doing it. Go ahead, Maria.
When they put the offerings on the altar, it doesn't mention that they were consumed by fire. It just mentions smoke.
Mhm.
And later, when the fire comes from the presence of God, it says the offerings were consumed by his fire. So was there a fire in the altar at the beginning, or what?
Don't get smoke without fire.
Yeah.
I asked the rabbis. They're the ones that put this question.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that said there was no fire.
Yeah.
And they mentioned smoke twice.
Right. And I with Pastor Paul, it's you're not going to get smoke unless you have a fire. So they had to have put a fire there, but it wasn't consuming the sacrifice. It wasn't until the Lord brought fire from his presence that it consumed the whole offering. Okay. In fact, Pastor Paul is going to join in.
Yeah, I'm going to join in because when you're dealing with anything that went on the altar, there were very specific parts of every offering that was supposed to be that which rose up to God in the first place. Now, when he consumed stuff, especially at this point, when we're inaugurating something, when he sent fire and consumed it, that was to signify to the people, yeah, I'm taking that. And
Right.
it became, if you will, a covenant mandate. In other words, he took it, he said, I'm taking it, you brought it. Now, everybody's obligated to this. And when you first take an animal, you know, it's all the fat around the kidneys and different parts of the body, that is what's put on that rises up. It's the smell, not that God smells, but nonetheless, That's what it signifies, is the smoke going up.
Yeah, pleasing aroma. You're
Yeah.
right.
God doesn't smell, but nonetheless, we do, so we kind of get the idea, and that's the whole point.
Yeah.
But very specific things were put on the altar that went up to God. Other things, if they were consumed,
Yeah.
it was a whole different matter, and it was a covenant agreement of, I receive it, and we're all obligated. Chapter 11 get very serious about that.
See, Pastor Paul would get some of these rabbis really upset when he says that God doesn't smell,
Yeah.
if it's a pleasing aroma, there you
I was just gonna ask you.
Yeah, that's
What do you
like,
mean by that?
yeah, it's just like, we read when Yeshua came back after his resurrection, and he cooked a meal for the disciples, so, to say, well, the Lord doesn't eat, and then earlier in Genesis, we read in Exodus where the elders and Moses and Aaron, and they all went and they had a meal with the Lord. So, I don't know, like I said, I think when it says pleasing aroma,
You got the Holy Spirit in you. When is he
I know.
said, oh man, that's great.
yeah.
When it says pleasing aroma,
Yes.
it's not the smell. What God sees is the obedience.
Yeah, man.
It's not the smell or whatever.
You don't think it encompasses all of it, the whole
It's
thing?
The obedience.
Yeah,
It rises up, and he sees it, and the world sees it, and the people sees.
yeah.
It's the obedience that he sees.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to find out,
Uh-huh. Go ahead, Maria.
He's,
I didn't say anything.
No, Maria, I agree with you. And because, and that's what he desires, more above all, our obedience.
the offerings were put on the altar, but nothing was happening, which is why Moses and Aaron went into the sanctuary and prayed.
Right.
And when they came back out, they blessed the people
Yeah.
again. And that's when the fire came out. And that's when the people were happy, because they knew that their offerings were now accepted.
Well,
At
you
the
see-
beginning, it was like nothing was happening.
Yeah. Well, I have a comment on that, and I was going to get to it on my next paragraph, but you jumped ahead of me, Maria. So go ahead, Frank.
There's a scripture, I don't know where it is, but it says that the aroma went up as a pleasing aroma
Yeah.
to his nostrils. So how can anybody say that God does not smell?
Yeah.
That's what
Well, you know
we don't
what?
know for sure.
Well, we don't, but we always laugh and say, what was it? Three Jews, or no, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. So, there's a lot of commentary. Wait till, we haven't even gotten to, Nadab and Abihu yet. And there's a lot of reasons on why they were consumed. So, we're going to get there in a bit. Go ahead, Maria.
It also says in Psalms that God has feathers. So he doesn't have feathers, so why would he have nostrils?
I don't know, he doesn't have photos.
it says he covered me with feathers. Or does it mean he has feathers?
It's in there somewhere.
I'm gonna get it.
Okay.
Everybody else is looking it up.
Okay, it then says that Aaron lifted up his hand towards the people and he blessed them. Then Moses and Aaron both went into the tent of meeting. When they came out again, the people were blessed again. So here it is the second time. This time they were blessed by both Moses and Aaron, as Maria was saying. But I don't believe it. But I believe this is the time when they both went in together. You know how sometimes, pastors move on or whatever, and they hand off the mantle to the maybe associate pastor. Oh, somebody set off an alarm. Okay, it's probably upstairs. I know,
Upstairs, more than likely,
yeah,
probably in the meeting room.
in the meeting room, yeah. Yep.
The baton.
Well, yeah, handing it off. Well, this is where, like I said, here it is. They both went into the tent of meeting together. Okay, both Moses and Aaron. And like I said, I believe that this is the time when Aaron became the official high priest. Okay, Moses' time as trainer and getting everything ready, it's now over. We do not read anywhere else going forward that he goes into the Holy of Holies after this. So when they walk out, and you're right, in verses 23 and 24, it says that the Lord appeared to all the people right after this, and everything was pleasing to the Lord. Everything, and the fire came out, consumed the sacrifices, consumed everything that they were doing. To this point, they were doing it correctly, and they did it exactly the way God designed it. So I think it's more, myself, Maria, I think it's more of, he's acknowledged that now Aaron is the high priest, his sons are priests, and going forward, this is going to be the protocol. Okay, Moses cannot go in ahead of Aaron from this point on. You know, it's a status change. No, he doesn't. He doesn't. He has accomplished up to this point, because there's going to be much more that Moses is going to accomplish. But up to this point, all that was desired for him to do to get everything ready, it's done. Now Aaron is the high priest. So I think when we read this, that they both went in, they both came out, this was the last time that, both of them together would go in. From this point on, I don't read anywhere where Moses goes into the Holy of Holies. Yeah.
God went visiting him in the tent of meeting.
Yeah.
Outside of the camp.
Outside, you're right. Okay, Pastor Paul.
I would just say about that is that when there was a change of status here, we also have experienced a change of status with Yeshua. And right now, he's in the holy place, holy of holies, if you will. But he's not here on the earth. He doesn't have to come here. Everybody goes, oh, we want him here, we want him here. But truthfully, the change of status is when you come to faith in him, your status changes and you become the minister here. You become the servant that works here. He's not coming here. He sent his spirit, the Holy Spirit, and that's who's here, and he's in each one of us. So when we go, oh, we got to have a Lord, Lord come, Lord come, Lord come. How many times have that been prayed?
Yeah.
He's not coming. The Holy Spirit is already here. And we, me, you, and all of us are supposed to be the work of the ministry. We're all called to be ministers. And we minister, quote unquote, what all this stuff in the tabernacle represented.
Right.
We minister all of this. Whether it's healing, whether it's restoration, whether it's repentance, whatever, we're ministering this.
Right. And so the fire comes out before the Lord, from the Lord, and everyone fell down before the Lord. The Torah tells us to prostrate ourselves on what days? On Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh. Okay, when did this happen? It happened on the 1st of Nisan, which is Rosh Chodesh. Okay, so here the people are prostrating themselves before the Lord. But, and a lot of times we think, we used to sing that song, coming into the Holy of Holies, yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Beautiful song, but, there's protocol, and it's something that we did not learn until we return to the ancient paths. When we do that, then we see that there is wisdom, that the Jews have some wisdom. There might be they might have put up some fence laws and stuff like that, or some things sound like they're really off base, but there is wisdom into getting back to the ancient paths, because there are things there that we need to know, and we need to know the way we are right now. I mean, you can only go so far. And imagine if the temple was in place right now up in Mount Moriah, on the Temple Mount. How close would we be able to get to it? Because there's protocol. So like I said, fire came out before the Lord, and everybody fell to their face. All this is taking place at the first of Nisan, which is Rosh Hashanah. The Bible gives us 6 examples where God accepted a sacrifice with fire from heaven. And I'm going to share them with you after Pastor Paul.
Oh, okay, I was just gonna comment on the difference. The ancient paths, we're called to return to them, that's for sure. But we have to realize we are not returning to them with a Levitical mindset. And that's the big problem we have within the Messianic community. We have a real tendency to think that get in the Messianic community, we're going totally back to the Sadducees or the Pharisees understanding. Right. We're not, because we have a change of status. Yeshua is not a Levitical priest, he's a Melchizedekian priest.
Right.
And king. And he changed his stuff. And he has changed stuff. And we have to learn to recognize what the changes are and why. And, that's one of the things we have to come to an agreement on. Right. Because we do things just because the Jewish community does it. We think, okay, we're doing it right. Yeah, but Yeshua has changed some of those things. And we really have to pay attention, because they're not blatant. Right. They're subtle, but they are a change, because he is Lord of the Sabbath. He's also Lord of the Moedim.
Right.
And all the rest of it. And so we have to be willing to open our eyes and see that, because if we don't, we just emulate the Jewish community, and that's not who we're supposed to be emulating.
And what he's saying, it is, because if you go into Judaism, how many different sects of Judaism do you have? Orthodox, Reform, and all, you can go on. And then Christianity, what? 38,000 different denominations, so 84,000. Oh my gosh. So now, and then you get into the Messianic, it's the same thing. You can go into some Messianic congregations and you think you're at an Orthodox Jewish meeting, and I don't believe that's what Yeshua intended for the Jewish sect called the Way. I think our Messianic congregations are going to look, they do look different. We were in Israel one year, and we went to what was called a Messianic congregation. And you would have thought you were at a Southern Baptist convention. It was
like a Christian church.
It was it was, yeah, there was it was just like, because Mary and Rob, we were all there, and it was like, just like walking into a Christian church here in Southern California. And she's exactly right. And I think what was sad, Tila, was there was a gal there, a young lady, that she just couldn't have any children. And she wanted prayer. She wanted prayer. Well, after service was over, a crowd just gathered around her, and we just prayed and prayed and prayed. Not one person from her congregation. They were all from
I
Shiloh.
think we were the only ones wearing tallit.
We were the only ones wearing tallit. You're right, tallit. Yeah.
We had freedom in the spirit.
Oh, we did. We did. You know, yeah. And I don't know if their pastor was happy to see us because they never welcomed us. You know, they're these.
Invite you back.
I don't know if we'll go back to that messianic congregation. So, go ahead, Bill.
Well, Deuteronomy 30, Deuteronomy 30, chapter 6, and the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your offspring, so you will love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, that you may live. So even way back then, circumcision was an issue all the way through
Right.
Yeshua's time, and way back in Deuteronomy, God's giving the purpose, the better way. And since you brought it up, I think we should discuss Torah study,
Uh-huh.
because we're kind of copying the Jews, and we study the first 5 books of the Bible, which are most amiable to the Jewish people, and we never study the books of God beating up the Jewish people, the minor prophets, major prophets, the so-called history, all that. So there's 66 books in the Bible, and maybe that should be our Torah study.
You have a point there. I think at one time, didn't we break away one year?
Yeah, we did.
I think one year we did break away, and we
We did only
the Haftorah or something.
Thursday night we do that.
New Testament.
Yeah.
One book.
No, we did the Bri Hadashah one year, and we started doing different portions of that. We may have to.
It's not a huge criticism. It's just we're kind of falling into that.
Sure.
Hey, this is what the Jews do, so this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
How about the other 61 books?
Yeah, exactly. No, you're right. I think maybe we should, like this one, I didn't even get into I'm not even going to get into the Haftorah.
Can't even handle the 5 books.
And you're right. Every year that we go through the Torah portion, I mean, now, if this was the ground before we're this high above it, now maybe we're just a little bit high. So we still got a ways to go. You're right. And then a lot of times there are nuggets in there that we don't even get until we covered it 6 or 7 times. So unfortunately, but you're right, Bill. I think we tried it one year, and we should probably have to go back and do it again,
Most of the people in congregation are Christian,
Yeah.
and so we know more about the Brit Hadashah. than
Yeah,
we do
that's
about
true.
Torah.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is, if we don't know Torah, then we don't know what Yeshua has done that has actually changed it.
Right.
Too late. But I wasn't saying Brit Hadashah.
Yeah, you're just saying the other 61
Micah,
books.
Zechariah,
Yeah.
Isaiah.
Yeah.
We Isaiah we cover pretty heavily.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not sure, even I've been to Bible school, if I can name the so-called minor prophets,
Right.
not this one,
Right.
Obadiah, all those guys.
No, you're absolutely right.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the kids know.
And this is coming from an unbearded one.
Well, in private, I'll tell you something my drill sergeant said to me many years ago.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was going to share with you 6 other places where God accepted fire from heaven, and you might want to jot them down on your notes there. Right here, obviously here in 9:24 with Aaron, and the fire comes out and it consumes the sacrifice. So we read it right here in Leviticus 9:24. We read it in Judges 6:21. In Judges 6:21, it says, "Then the angel of the Lord put out the end of the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened bread, and fires sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread. Then the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. And this is with Gideon. Gideon was the person that this happened to. And then in Judges 13, 19 to 23, it speaks about Manoah, and these are the parents of Samson. So in this here, same thing happened. In fact, in this one, in this reading here, it's in 13, what did I say, 13, 19 to 23. What we read here is, so Manoah took the young goat and with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord, and he performed wonders while Manoah and his wife looked on. For it came about when the flame went up from the altar toward heaven that the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. So all this was happening there, and it was soon after this that they were speculating. Man, what was this? Did you see the angel go up and this, and what's happening here? Maybe it was it's condemnation against us or whatever. Well, it was nothing like that, because his wife came out. The wife, she wasn't a bearded one, but she was the one. But she was the wise one, But she said no. All of this wouldn't have happened unless it was God, speaking to us. So, and shortly after this, she became pregnant, and she gave birth to Samson. So that's in Judges 13, 19 to 23. Then in 1 Chronicles 21 to 28, this is with David. And we know about how David purchased the threshing floor, and it had to cost him. And then part of that cost was after he purchased it, he lifted up a sacrifice to the Lord, and fire came down from heaven, and God was pleased. So that's 1 Chronicles 21, 28, and that was with David. And then we're going to move on to 2 Chronicles. Okay, 2 Chronicles 7:1. Okay, if you want to write that down. And this one is with Solomon. And let's see, 2 Chronicles 7:1. It says, now when Solomon had finished praying, fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. So here again, we see it. What happened in what we read in Genesis or in Leviticus. It's not a one-time thing. The Lord, His fire is going to come down, and these are all areas where the Lord was pleased. Okay, and the last one that I have for you is in 1 Kings 18:38.
So if I give a really big offering.
There we
to the
go.
Congregation and God's pleased.
Will fire come? If you do, Pastor Paul said that if he gives a really big offering, is the Lord going to be pleased and fire is going to come out from heaven as long as it's
I'll write a check.
outside.
I'll write a check.
But do it outside. So, okay, now in verses 23 and 24, the glory of the Lord. Oh, I'm sorry, I already got past that. Okay, now let's move on to chapter 10. Okay, enough of chapter 9. Let's go to chapter 10. There is a phrase from a book by Charles Dickens, and you may have read it because I know when I was in school, we had to read it, and we did, and it was called A Tale of Two Cities. And do you remember the way it started? It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. The whole nation of Israel had gathered near the tabernacle, and just as they witnessed God's glory on Mount Sinai, they are here at the tabernacle witnessing the glory of God once again. Everyone face down, worshiping the Lord. Boy, that had to be a beautiful sight. Everybody on their face worshiping the Lord. Then, bam, all the celebration and praising became a disbelieving or a whoa, what happened here? So let's read together in Leviticus 10, 1 to 3. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took their respective fire pans, and after putting fire in them, placed incense on the fire and offered a strange fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, "It is what the Lord spoke, saying, by those who come near me, I will be treated as holy, and before all the people I will be honored." So Aaron therefore kept silent. In Roman numeral 2, Nadab and Abihu. Nobody is perfect. The fill-in is nobody and perfect. You know, when I read this, I think the phrase that had not been commanded seems to be the key. Okay. We have just covered many chapters in which Moses and all the Israelites made the building, the furnishing, they dedicated the tabernacle, and all this was according to the instructions of God, what he commanded. Nadab and Abihu did something different and died as a result. This story seems to be troubling to many people. You might look at it and say, man, why such a reaction from the Lord like that, you know? But there are many commentators, many rabbis, many people that they have trouble with this too. Killing two servants seems to be a little extreme. Okay, go ahead, Tila.
Well, I have a question, and that is this all in the same time frame? I mean, this has all happened at the same time frame?
The first day of Nisan. We are still at Rosh Chodesh
So we're still
Nisan.
there, okay.
Yes, that is correct. You know, and that's a very good question, because there's a lot of times we read something and then you find out you're talking about a month behind or ahead or time or 2 years time. You know, it's just like all the plagues. There's a lot of people that believe that when the plagues came, they were bam, 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 right? You know, but no, they weren't. You know, there was a time frame in there. So you're right. And one thing you're going to find too in the word is sometimes things aren't in chronological order. You know, you might skip something and then go back to it, and but it's still the word of God. Okay, these are the same two who, along with Moses, Aaron, and 70 elders, ascended Mount Sinai earlier and prostrated themselves before God. They even had a meal with the Lord. Both had witnessed all the miracles God did bringing the Israelites out of Egypt. So what was their motivation in changing things up? Whatever their motivation, it wasn't holiness unto the Lord. You know, and one other thing that every time, it's not like we read Adab and Abihu, you know, everywhere in the Bible. They do show up, and they show up as you know, righteous men. But every time you read them, have you noticed that it's always Adab and Abihu? It's never, and Adab did this, Abihu did this, or whatever, but they're always mentioned together, you know, and yet, you know, and that's what we got here. Moses, you know, and like I told you, people have problems with this because, well, for one thing, Moses broke the tablets when he saw the people, you know, at the golden calf incident. He also, what did he also do? He also hit the rock instead of speaking to it as God had told him to do. Okay. And then you think about Abraham. Abraham questioned the Lord coming to the defense of Sodom. You know, God did not kill any of them. You know, according to many commentaries, Nadab and Abihu were punished for other infractions. The sages give us 6 reasons of what Nadab and Abihu did wrong. Okay, and well, in letter A, celebration turns to tragedy. So the fill-in is tragedy. Okay, the first thing that the sages say is Adab and Abihu were being disrespectful. Maria and I were talking about this earlier before Torah study. One should not render, it says that they say that one should not render judgment in front of his teacher. You're never greater than your teacher. Okay. Nadab and Abihu did so in front of their teacher Moses, ruling that it was a mitzvah for them to bring their own fire to the altar. Okay, but they were being disrespectful to their teacher. When they read this paragraph that we just read, this is what they take from it. Okay, now what's that? They would. You're right, they would. Okay, the other reason that they're saying is they were drinking on the job. Okay. Caught up in the excitement of the moment, the two entered the tabernacle well intoxicated. This explains why this episode is followed up by an admonishment not to serve in the tabernacle while drunk. And we'll read that later on in verses 8 to 10. We were discussing this, and, you know, if they were drunk, you don't think somebody would have told them, you know?
Maybe they were all drunk.
Pastor Paul says maybe they were all drunk. So, so there's another reason: being disrespectful, drinking on the job. Another reason is they never married. And remaining single for no good reason at all in the Jewish mindset is a sin. Okay, many single, and this is what the sages come up with, or the commentaries. Many single women were hoping to marry them, but Nadab and Abihu would say, the brother of our father, Moses, is a king. The brother of our mother, Nakshan is a prince. Our father Aaron is a high priest. and we are the two vice high priests. Which woman is good enough for us?
Oh, my.
So that's one of the reasons they come up with. They never married. Okay. Okay.
One thing
You
about.
have the microphone?
Yeah,
I don't know where it goes. Just toss it in. See it drop like.
The one thing about reproduction though, anybody who is unable to reproduction, the reason for that is actually a curse. Because God's command was we are to be fruitful and multiply. And one of the things we have to realize in the community we're in today, when people are unable to reproduce, there really is a curse involved. And before we spend a lot of time praying for women, for example, that have issues going on, you have to stop and think, that's not natural. We were created, all of us, to function,
Right.
and women were created to function.
Amen.
And so if they're unable, the first thing you got to deal with is there a curse involved? And when you look at scripture, that's all about, if you can't reproduce, there's a curse.
No, and thing about, we are called to, multiply, I think Peggy and I did that very well, so we did.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about
you only gave me the three. Thank you, Lord, that you just stop right there.
Okay, another reason go ahead, Maria.
Every time we come to this, I've always had questions. This time I read different commentaries.
Uh-huh.
And the picture that I got was these two were higher in stature, in education, in spirituality, above the elders.
Mhm.
The people looked up to them. They were pillars of the community. They spent 7 days in the sanctuary. On the 8th day, they took over the duties.
Right.
Now, in between this, I don't know where people get that they got drunk. If they did get drunk, where was Moses?
Yeah.
Where was Aaron? Where were the elders to say, wait a second, there's something wrong with them? Nothing. The fire came down according to Josephus. Everybody got excited because God is there.
Amen. You're right.
They wanted to give their sacrifice. They did not bring the right sacrifice, but they were enthusiastic for God. So they took what they had. Their mistake was presumption. They took over the duties of a priest, which they were but a high priest, and went before God with no covering,
Right.
no koban.
Yeah.
And they were consumed just like anybody would have been consumed. And if you read later, God says that they were a sacrifice to him. And they were given a burial and a funeral that was second to none.
Yeah.
And yet we look on them and say they committed a sin.
I don't know if,
We're wrong. We gotta get out of that.
No, I don't think, I think within our midrash or our congregation here, maybe when we were a Christian church, we may have thought that, or maybe a lot of Christians think that they sin. But I don't think in here, I don't think any of us think that they sin. But like you're saying about the drunk part, they always, in verses 8 to 10, which comes afterward, they talk about drinking. So they're saying that was the reason why. I don't think when you go forward, it's talking about something before. I'm thinking when we read that later on, it's going to be for something that's in front of it later on. not behind it. But we'll get there, and then I'll give you my opinion on, when I started looking into this, what I really believe why they were taken out.
If anybody was drunk, they had to all be drunk.
Yeah, you're right.
Because they would not be allowed to go in there in that
Yeah.
condition.
Exactly. Well, I already gave you being disrespectful, drinking on the job. They were never married. The next one they say is behaving casually before the divine. When God revealed himself at Sinai, they acted too casually by eating, drinking, and staring at the divine as if they were looking at a friend. Okay, that was another reason why they feel that the Lord came down and just took their life. Go ahead, Bill.
I don't oversimplify it.
Yeah, you do.
Each took his censer, put fire in it, and laid incense on it, and offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. So what's the discussion about?
Yeah, exactly. But like I'm telling you, they all, and I'm only giving you 6. There may be more out there. In fact, there are more reasons, but the next one is seeking power. You said that being high above. It says once Moses and Aaron were they give this story. The Midrash gives this story. It says once Moses and Aaron were walking down the road, and Nadab and Abihu were walking behind them. Nadab turned to Abihu and said, "When will these 2 elders die so that you and I can lead the generation?" God heard this and said, "Let's see who will bury whom." So they were seeking power. Okay. The last one I'm going to give you is they did not seek advice. They were too self-assured and didn't seek counsel or advice from Moses or Aaron, or even from each other. So, when they were taking the censer in, they didn't ask, is this right? Well, what do you think? Well, brother, what do you think? I don't know, I don't know. We also read before the Lord. So here's another reason. Could it mean that Aaron's 2 sons dared to go past the veil and into the Holy of Holies? When they brought the censer in, the incense, they were only supposed to take it so far. Did they try to go further than that? And then the Lord, the Holy of Holies was off limits to them. Okay. I tend to believe that both Nadab and Abihu were killed for another reason. Like their father Aaron and their 2 younger brothers, they were priests. They're being held to a higher standard. 7 days of practice. Everything had to be done just right. God wants it done his way, not man's way. This is why all the rehearsing. Moses and Abraham, we talked a little bit about them. They were not priests, they were prophets. Okay, the job description of Aaron and his sons made them not ordinary. They had a special job. This was a divine service, being a priest. They could not be spontaneous, but Moses could. Prophets do not have a ritual way of speaking. How many prophets, have the same way? It's funny how, I know there's a lot of pastors that have the same way. I mean, if you listen to a lot of these pastors, and thus says the Lord, and and you listen to one to the other, and it's like, oh man, they must have went to pastor school, and but your prophets, it seems every they all have different ways of doing it. So like I said, the priests, they had a divine service. You know, prophets do not have a ritual way of speaking, what the Lord puts in their mouths. But the priests do have a ritual job, and it must be done a certain way. The priest serves God a certain way, and this never changed throughout the 40 years in the wilderness. In fact, the sages say that it remained the same all the way into the first temple. A prophet speaks what is needed at that certain time. Words of a prophet are always different, yet a priest's words are always the same. For example, the Aaronic Blessing. The Aaronic Blessing hasn't changed in over 3,000 years. Okay, you know, but the Aaronic Blessing hasn't changed, you know. Rabbis, you know, I don't know, I was saddened back in November when Rabbi Sachs passed away. He's a rabbi in Great Britain. In his writings, I've got a book in his writings that said, he says that no two prophets are alike. They could be spontaneous, but a priest, that's another story. Nadab and Abihu could not for 1 second think that they could bring something better before the Lord. And that may have been what they were doing. I want to give more, you know. They could not choose where they would get their fire from. If it's the pan and they got the fire and they decided, well, any fire would do. No, it won't do. Okay. Though both prophet and the priest serve the same God, Rabbi Sachs said, what is required from both are much different. The tragedy of Nadab and Abihu is they were acting as prophets when they should have been doing the job of a priest. We are told in Torah that Aaron did not utter a word. We read where it says that he kept silent. Okay. Aaron could not mourn for his sons in the presence of the Lord. So this may have been his way of mourning by keeping quiet. This may have been the hardest day of his life. And soon after, in verses 8 to 11, the commandment not to drink wine or intoxicating drink, that's where we read it. We start, and that's why people think that this is why that they were killed. Verses 10 and 11 would be more of a reason that the priest should not be intoxicated. Their job is to distinguish between holy and unholy, and clean and unclean. So the priest would have to explain this to the people. And then it goes on to say that he was also required to teach the children. Okay, so you know, to say that they came in drunk before the Lord, I don't think so. I think when they put this in, don't drink, because you're now going to be required to do other steps or teach the children. I mean, how many of you want a drunk priest teaching your children? Yeah. You know, so, you know, the bodies of Nadab and Abihu were removed from to the outside the camp. The whole nation of Israel were allowed to mourn the death of Aaron's sons. And I agree with you, Maria. I think that they mourned their death. They buried the two men. But the remaining priests that were serving could not. Aaron continued to offer the sacrifices, so he's still there. But, you know, did you read where it said, but he did not eat anything? You know, these sacrifices that, you know, the chapter ends here and it moves on to chapter 11. But like I said, I really believe that the reason that they were killed is because they had a priestly job to do, and they weren't doing it as a priest. So the Lord took them out, and that's my reasoning. But you know, so now we're going to go into chapter 11. We'll spend the next half hour on Leviticus 11. So In B, I was asking a question, were they being disrespectful or drinking on the job? In letter C, were they behaving casually before the Lord? In letter D, harsh lessons for approaching God in an unacceptable manner. And this was a harsh lesson. You know,
But
we,
chapter 10 was really about making that decision of accepting or rejecting God's covenant agreement.
Mhm.
And in this whole,
Well, use the microphone,
Bill?
use the mic.
we just need to have a string. We can just-
No, it's true. I do.
A line, a line.
There you go. Good short.
Yeah.
I'll pass it right back.
All right, well, chapter 10 was really about the acceptance or rejection of God's invitation to enter into a covenant relationship. And so that's what chapter 10 is about. So when you're laying that out, that's a very serious chapter.
Yes.
And everything in it is serious, really. Now, the thing is, they had freedom. Israel never had to accept that agreement. They were free to reject it without consequence. The problem is when you accept it, then chapter 11 comes along and tells you, these are the requirements.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
blessings and the requirements, and then you're in it.
Right. Yep. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, they could have said no, but they were the only nation that said yes.
Yeah.
You know, now this is what's required. And they validated it with here the fire comes out from heaven, consumes the sacrifice. They all fall on their face. I mean, this is the same God that brought them out of Egypt, you know, that appeared on Mount Sinai. Now he has a whole nation gathered together, and before everybody, the Lord appears again. So, you know, and you know, and at this point, you know, I mean, we all know it, but it's a mixed multitude.
Right.
There's a mixed multitude of people there. You know, man, that's awesome. You know, in fact, even, you know, the rabbis say that the whole calf, golden calf incident was, it was a mixed multitude people that caused everything, you know? So yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it wasn't the Israelites, it was a mixed multitude, you know?
They're all
But-
from Boston.
Yeah. Those foreigners, it's all those foreigners. But then later on, when they go into, finally get into the promised land, we're going to read where Moses, when after Moses had died and Joshua took him in, he took in a mixed multitude. So, you know, there's people that attach themselves to the Lord for life. And isn't that the way it should be? You know, so in letter E of Roman numeral 2, priests are called to a higher standard of holiness. Amen. And that's the way it should be. Okay, we're going to go into Leviticus 11 now, and in Roman numeral 3, laws about animals for food. Okay, in Leviticus 11, this chapter discusses three distinctions of creatures we read about in Genesis 1. Okay, in Genesis 1, we read about man ruling over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all living things that move on the earth. Okay, man is in control. All right, and as Pastor Paul was saying, they didn't have to accept this task, but they did. Okay. The three distinctions of animals that are also mentioned here in Leviticus 11, but this time around, the creatures in the sea, the sky, and the earth are categorized as clean and unclean for eating according to the formula God lays out. So let's talk about the land animals first. God makes two distinct stipulations about the land animals he considers clean that may be eaten by the Israelites. These land animals must be split-hoofed and a cud chewer. The animal must have both distinctions and not just one of them. A non-cud non-cud chewing split huffer isn't good enough. You know, when I read it in my mind, I could say it perfectly. Do any of you have that problem, or am I the only one? Take notice of the rabbit. A rabbit nibbles and nibbles and nibbles away at its food, and it is definitely a cud chewer, but it lacks a split hoof. Therefore, it's not clean to eat. Okay, and I never knew that until we started discussing all this. It's funny how every time we have, not every time, but we do have potlucks here or onags, and somebody always, they'll bring in something that is not kosher, So what's, huh? Not a rabbit, but there's other things that pork and whatever that is off limits too. But we talk about some of these animals that you can and cannot eat. In Roman numeral, or in letter A, it's important to God that we eat clean. Okay. So secondly, are the sea creatures. Sea creatures must also meet two qualifications. They must have fins and scales. That means that creatures that live at the bottom of the sea, like shrimp, lobster, and those kinds of creatures do not qualify. I know somebody said one of my favorites, but only those fish that have fins and scales would qualify as being clean. And I don't know about you, but in our BC days, crab and lobster, delicious, but yeah, but but they're off limits, everyone. Okay, sharks do not qualify because scales must be true scales that can be removed without damaging the skin of the fish. That can't be done with sharks. You cannot. But being that sharks urinate through their skin, I think that would render them unclean anyway. Yeah. Did any of you know that? That sharks urinate through their skin. Yeah. So when we read that, I think that would be unclean anyway. So no more shark. No more octopus. Oh man, no more sharks unless it's baby shark for the grandkids. So. No, we just received a outfit for our little 6-month-old, and it was a baby shark. Well, you know what? That little girl, her favorite cartoon is Peppa Pig, so that's definitely not kosher. So Peppa Pig. Yeah. I could put her on my lap and she's just, but yeah. So, okay, now the third creature are those of the air. it seems as if no qualification are given, meaning that a bird doesn't have to have two wings. Creatures of the air are those that are like non-vulture like. What I mean by this is that they are not sitting around waiting for something to die so they can go pick it up and eat it. Then there are flying insects. Flying insects are considered unclean, with the exception of those that have a set of jumper legs, so they can leap through or propel themselves through the air. Jumping insects, in other words, there are flying insects that are edible. Locusts. What did John the Baptist eat? Locust with honey. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Frank. Somebody give Frank the mic. See, we're talking about flying insects, and right away Frank's hand went up. I think he loves flying insects.
About eating stuff from off the ranch.
Go ahead, Frank.
Since we're on this topic of clean and unclean, and I know this has been explained to me before, but it's still not quite clear as with how Romans 14 impacts this.
Okay, well, I know I'm going to get to Mark.
How about does somebody good whatever they eat?
Yeah, but that Romans, then that isn't talking about, it's not specifically, the context is not food. The context is salvation.
That's what I don't understand, because it says meat.
Well, you know, it's just like using an example, and he's using that as an example that, hey, if I said it's clean, you know, then it's clean. So in other words, a Gentile or a non-believer can come into fellowship or can receive salvation. So I think what happens is the Christian church takes it all out of context and says it's about food. It's not about food, it's about salvation.
Is there anywhere in the New Testament that, let's say, overrides this rules?
I don't think so, because if Yeshua was fully Torah observant and accomplished everything, then he would have eaten kosher.
Because a lot of,
Yeah, go ahead.
One more portion. A lot of mainstream Christianity, which we know is not messianic, they don't go along with any of this.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Peggy and I went to a gathering. I don't know if any of you did with your kids and everything, and they had ham there. You know, that's the meat. That's the meat of that season. You know, so they had ham there. You know, we don't partake of that. You know, we'll eat turkey.
Nachos are probably more than that.
Go ahead, Pastor Paul.
The only thing that overrides it, Frank, is the scripture that tells us if we go to somebody's house and they serve us food, we are just to receive it with thanksgiving. And if it happens to be the wrong stuff, that's just beside the point. The personal relationship is more important than what you put in your mouth.
What
Because
you're
you should have said,
consuming.
whatever you put in your mouth just passes through the system
Yeah,
and it leaves. It's what comes out of your mouth that
yeah.
Because somewhere else it says that it is not what
That's in Mark.
goes into a man's heart that defiles him, but what comes out.
That's in
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is that referring to food, what goes into your,
he'll get to it.
Well, I'll get to that.
okay.
Yes.
So when we go to somebody's house and eat, we're supposed to just eat the pork chop that we're served?
Yeah,
Or what?
Yeah.
try to get around it
But you can.
if you can.
Yeah.
So,
Give it to Pastor Paul. Pastor Bruce.
I always tell everyone, and when someone invites us over and they say, oh, is there anything that you don't eat? And I go, yes, I don't eat anything that's pork or
Yeah.
anything. I let them know up front.
I think Pastor Bruce said it, well right now when he said, try to get around it.
Right.
If you can, my kids know that we don't eat pork. And so they won't throw, for instance, my daughter makes a wonderful broccoli salad. And years ago, they used to put bacon bits in there. Now what she does is she uses turkey bacon, so, they've got enough, they know us that we don't eat pork. So,
This isn't family
you know,
we're talking about.
yeah, but and then if they make it, well, they're making it for themselves. They're not making it for us. So we do try to get around it. Okay, Pastor Bruce?
Remember, I'm always sharing, it's important. Letter kills. And if you go to somebody's house, they serve pork and you absolutely make a big scene and refuse to eat it, you've just killed the relationship probably.
Right.
There you go.
The letter kills, the spirit of the word brings life.
Yes.
So you want to capture the essence. So the essence is you're not going to eat pork if it's under your control. Okay, or shellfish or whatever, anything that's unclean, you're going to try to eat clean. But if one of my spiritual mentors did a lot of work in Brazil, and one of the things down there is to show your real respect, they killed the family dog and served it for dinner. And when somebody kills a member of their family, if you reject that, then it's problematic. And the Lord is more concerned about our relationships than he is about whether you eat a little dog or whatever.
No, I don't feel well. I can't eat today.
Yeah, well, it's all about people.
Right.
That's what we have to remember. So
That's good.
if somebody served pork to us when we were going somewhere, if there was other things to eat, I would just eat the other things.
Right.
And I wouldn't say anything.
Right.
And you just go, yeah, I just don't feel like meat tonight or what.
We serve pork to Seventh-day Adventists.
We did serve pork accidentally to a Seventh-day Adventist. We didn't have a clue, and we served pork chops. And, I mean, it was not a bad deal because it was more for me that way, but, because I was eating pork in those days, but, so it capture the essence of the word. That's the most important thing.
Yes.
Don't get hung up on the letter of the law.
Listen to the Holy Spirit, right?
Okay, in Leviticus 11, it also talks about dead carcasses. Oh, Bill? I started talking about dead carcasses and then Bill raises his hand. We love you, Bill. Don't you feel the love?
Listen. Well, I was going to agree with what everything was being said. We have a Jewish neighbor, and it was pretty interesting because we went there and Sharon and I were kind of picking our way around, staying away from the ham and all the other stuff that they were serving. And that ended up being a positive, I believe, witness, because she was just kind of scratching her head and said, I'm Jewish, I'm serving ham and you're grabbing the chicken, and so I think there's, like you said, just follow the Holy Spirit. There's a time where it can be a real blessing too.
Yeah. Well, when we were in Israel one year, we had a tour guide, the guy, what was his name? But Ronnie, yeah, our tour guide, Ronnie, he was sharing with us that, I like to go to the deli and have a good ham sandwich. In Israel.
Jews are the worst eaters of all.
So.
There were 3 rabbis and they all ordered pork.
They all ordered. Okay, Leviticus 11, it talks about dead carcasses making the Israelites unclean. Leviticus 11:39. Any dead animal other than an animal which had been killed through the sacrificial process in front of the door of the tent of meeting is considered unclean. There are unclean animals that will defile in their death, and there are clean animals that will defile man in their death. If their death is not a sacrificial death, the carcasses are that which can contaminate. Okay, therefore, if a person eats a cow which has just been killed by a wolf, that person would be ceremonially or unclean, even though he could eat the meat if it was sacrificed to God. Okay, it's it's just like us. We can go to the market and buy our meat there, but if a car should hit an animal and it's been laying out there for a day or so, it's not no roadkill. Okay, God never tells Israel why something is considered clean or unclean, and he never gives a reason for what he calls clean or unclean. Mankind has tried to come up with reasons why God calls some foods clean and unclean. Most of this, it's just, people here, we said it earlier, two Jews, three opinions. They all have their own opinion of what can be eaten. We all have stories of a Jewish friend that eats unclean, and one of the commentaries I read, Wenham's commentary, came up with a few explanations, and I'll just mention three of them. Okay, the first is cultic explanation that says certain kinds of creatures were used in pagan ritual and worship. God could not allow an animal's association with paganism to be brought into the Israelite worship of the one true God. For example, pig bones were found all over the Near East and considered to be involved in pagan sacrificial rituals. This was likely true in Egypt too, but we have to remember that the sacrifice of a bull was also prominent amongst the pagans. So, yeah. God had no problem in saying to Israel that they ought to sacrifice the bull. So it doesn't mean that the creatures God proclaimed were unclean were only those that were involved in pagan worship. And those God said were clean were, because, he makes, what I'm getting at is he makes the rules. He said so. In fact, in letter B, it says, the fill in there is, the Lord will tell us what we can and cannot eat. And that's what he's doing. He said so. You might as well do a hook. Yeah. It's
Unexplained commandment. We don't understand it.
Yeah. In letter C, not all fish are clean, only those that have fins and scales. Okay, the second explanation is a symbolic interpretation. Those things that man eats or does not eat, then he is an imitator of God. That means there are only certain things which God allows to be offered up as a burnt offering to him. Interesting, the sacrificial terminology is used, but it is offered up as a food to God, and we're talking about earlier about a pleasing aroma. So now, obviously, God does not eat the food, but it is a symbolism that we're looking at. So if God is selective about what he eats, that is what is sacrificed to him, the Israelites ought to also be choosy about what they are going to eat. You could never sacrifice a pig and it'd be acceptable to the Lord, so if it's not acceptable to God, why would we want it to be acceptable to us? Go ahead, Bill.
I'm okay with God said it, so do it. But I think it's pretty interesting too. There is a health correlation to almost everything in the Bible, not only the food, but even have no, one of my problems, have no fear of tomorrow, what's anxiety. I mean, that's just a killer in so many ways. So many of the sayings of Yeshua or teachings of the Bible,
right?
God knows how we work, and pork having had a lot of friends who served in Indonesia, pork was it was a real mysterious killer, because they'd cook it underground like you do a cow.
Yeah.
Just cover it with fire, and it wouldn't quite get up to the heat it should get up to, and the stuff would start growing in your intestines and really cause huge problems.
Well, we've had people even in our congregation, and they've shared with us, especially those that were in the medical field, that would share with us about the problems with eating pork, and stuff like that. Or that one experiment that somebody did where they poured, I think they poured Coke, and all the maggots and everything else that just came out. Go ahead, Frank.
I don't know if anybody knows, but one of the pastors up here from New Wine, he just passed away from parasites after he made a trip to a foreign country.
Oh, Egypt? Yeah. I've always, years ago, I shouldn't say I've always wanted to, but years ago, I wanted to visit Egypt, because I thought I'd like to go to Egypt, and then from Egypt, go through, like the Exodus track, not for 40 years. I wanted to take the bus ride and then the boat ride, and but then we had a Jewish friend of ours tell us that you never go back. He said, you never go back. He said, the Jews do not go back to Egypt. He said, why do you want to go back? So, and after that, immediately my desire left. But then I think about a person who we used to contribute to, and it blew the horn, the trumpet, Bob Andre. And Bob Andre tells a story about going to Egypt, and then to go inside the pyramid. He says he got to the door. He says, I heard from the Lord. He says, don't go in. But he went in anyway. Okay, he got in like about 20 steps, and he said that he heard it real loud and clear, get out. And he turned around, and he says, and you got to realize that the passageway is only about this, wide. So he had to turn around, and people are coming in, and he said he got out of there, and he never went inside the pyramid. So, yeah. So, so I hear this about this pastor, and yeah. Is it? Yeah. Okay, the final explanation is the one I think we'll all consider to be the best explanation of any of that we can come up with. God never explains this. He never explains why he chose the Israelites either, except to say that they are the chosen people. Is there some reason why God chose Israel as opposed to the Canaanites? Did he choose the Israelites because they were so spiritually pure? They weren't. In Israel, that they served foreign gods when they were in Egypt, and they brought those foreign gods with them when they came out of Egypt. So why did God choose Israel and not some other nation? It was God's sovereign choice. That's it. They were no more good, no more evil about anybody else. God just made a choice, and it seems to be the best explanation. It was just his choice. God said he chose Jacob, and he rejected Esau. Why? Because the sovereign choices, it's his choice. What he has chosen to be is the point we see in the clean and unclean, as well as in the salvation of Israel. See, I want to bring up Mark 7:18-19. Mark 7:18-19, and it says, and he said to them, are you so lacking in understanding as well? Do you not understand that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, because it does not go into his heart, but into his stomach and is eliminated? Thereby he declared all foods clean.
That part's not true.
Right. He is simply stating that whatever food goes into the body is processed by the body through digestion, and then it's released. It is the body that processes it within itself, and it takes the nutrients it needs and expels what it does not need. But the verse really has nothing to do with what kind of food was processed. And we can look at it two different ways. The first is to simply say that since Yeshua keeps kosher and is talking to the Pharisees, remember he's talking to the Pharisees who also eat kosher. The kind of food is irrelevant because no one in this group is eating pig or shellfish. The second way to look at it, it was actually suggested by the Greek scholar Charles Rai. And he said that foods declared to be unclean are specified in Leviticus 11. In Mark 7, Yeshua is not coming up with a new law, but making the point that sin comes from the heart. So the defilement that comes to a Jew who ate unclean food was not caused by the food itself, but by the rebellious heart that acted in disobedience to God.
It's like
So-
a firewood situation.
That's like the firewood situation, you know? I'm going out on the Sabbath to pick up firewood. No, you're not supposed to do that. Well, I'm going to do it anyway, you know?
Pyramid anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to go in the pyramid anyway, you know? Go ahead, Bill.
Well, nothing like getting everybody upset before we quit, but the thing is, I look at it, even if I give you that all foods are now clean because it was dictated that, because sometimes you take scripture and the best thing to do is to give it to an 8-year-old. And how would they
Right.
look at that passage? It'd be pretty obvious, all foods are clean. So like with the circumcision, okay, I just read the passage about circumcision being one of the heart, even in Deuteronomy. You know, not saying, and then that doesn't mean that I circle back around and say, okay, well, no more circumcision because there was
Right.
good health benefits we know
Yeah.
from the circumcision. So the same thing, even if I were to give you that all foods are declared clean, God declared these foods unclean for a reason, and that's going to be my choice for a healthy eating style. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's the circumcision of the heart thing at play.
Yeah.
It doesn't cancel out what's done in the flesh,
Right.
even though that's unimportant according to Paul, and not one of the commandments according to Paul.
Right.
It's a little weird.
Pastor Bruce?
Yeah, a little bit off subject, but this chapter is very important to us because this really addresses the whole issue of evolution. And what I mean by that is, you know, evolutionists hold to the fact that we have evolutionary evidence in our museums that proves evolution, and they point to the Archaeopteryx. And Archaeopteryx was a half bird, half reptile. And so the conclusion that they draw from this sample, and we've got 6 specimens of this in the London Museum, I believe it is.
Yeah.
And what it is they point to that and say, this is the missing link to evolution. So, and they hang their hat on this whole concept with Archaeopteryx. Well, the interesting thing is in this chapter, in verse 18, if you turn over there, in verse 18, it says the white owl and the pelican, and it's already talked about gray owl and the different in each case. this word white owl, word is tenshemeth. Tenshemeth. And so they translate it here as an owl, but if you drop down to verse 30, same chapter, and where it says chameleon, this is the same word. Chameleon, of course, is a reptile, a lizard.
Right.
So you have the same word describing an animal that is a phylum unto itself. It's not that it acted with something else, and you got this bird lizard combination. God created this animal. And so this really negates the whole argument of the Archaeopteryx is the missing link that proves evolution. No, God created an animal that was half bird and half reptile.
Mhm.
And it's listed right here, the same word is used. One says a bird, one says a reptile.
And it is unclean.
It's
It is unclean either way, but
God created everything, yeah.
but it goes to that other issue of the evolution, because the evolutionists point to the Archaeopteryx as the proof for evolution.
Right. Okay, I got Mary first. Oh, you got the microphone. Why don't you go first?
Yeah, thanks for not bringing up the old Earth, new Earth thing, talking about evolution.
I can get into it if you like.
Yeah, but that's all fun stuff, but the problem is too, you don't hear this talked about quite as much as you used to. Because now science shows that DNA wise, rather than being closer to a chimpanzee type animal, we're closer to a banana. Well, I know a lot of people that would support that.
Yeah. Hey, I like bananas.
I have nothing to do with anything. I know a lot of fruits.
Okay, in Mark 7, it has never been the case that defilement came from an object in question or from a procedure. Rather, defilement comes from the rebellious heart that ignores God's commandment. So it seems that Mark 7 is not discussing kosher food at all. Yeshua is making the point that if you are a slave to sin, clean food will not save you from its penalty, but anything that goes out from a man is which defiles a man. So further in Mark, it says that from the heart of the sons of men proceed evil thoughts, adultery, fornication, theft, murder, extortion, wickedness, deceit, lust, and evil eye, blasphemy, pride, and foolishness. All these are evil things that do proceed from within a man and defile him. So it's not that kosher laws are irrelevant, but that righteousness is always relevant. So, did I give you?
It trumps.
What's that?
It trumps.
It trumps.
Uncleanness.
Yeah.
And other issues.
In other issues, absolutely. Did I give you D?
No.
Any dead animal is unclean.
Did you see the long line?
C was not all fish, not all fish are clean, only those that have fins and scales.
We have to eat our animals alive.
Okay,
I was thinking, a little weird, but yeah.
and letter E, Yeshua ate kosher. Okay, and that is our Torah study for today.